The American empire has over 1,000 overseas military bases, with between a dozen and 45,000 personnel. They are difficult to count as temporary bases open and close, while new bases recently appeared in Africa and Eastern Europe. The United States spends more to operate its overseas military bases each year than China spends on its entire military. Several of these bases have become worthless, yet remain open because of bureaucratic resistance. The largest unneeded base is also its oldest overseas base, the US Naval Station at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, known as Gitmo, and shown in this video. It supports 8,500 American personnel with all the amenities our modern Navy expects, including a school for the 400 children of sailors. It has a hospital, a church, a movie theater, recreation facilities, a McDonald's, and even a veterinarian clinic. The small ship maintenance activity at Gitmo was shut down in 1995, and the Fleet Training Group moved to Florida that same year. Gitmo is expensive to operate since every support item must be shipped from the United States, and the base must generate its own electricity and produce its own water. Construction projects cost twice as much since workers must be imported from the United States. It is considered a hardship post since sailors are not allowed outside the gates. No combat forces are based there, or even combat support forces. There are no ships, no aircraft, no weapons, nor munitions based at Gitmo. The United States seized Guantanamo Bay and established a naval base there in 1898 during the Spanish-American War. In 1903, the United States ordered its puppet government in Cuba to sign a perpetual lease granting the United States permission to use this land as a naval station where coal-powered ships could refuel. The United States Marine Corps based thousands of Marines there to support Latin American interventions, whose camps are shown in this photo. These Marine units eventually moved back to the United States. A few years later, longer-range, oil-powered ships entered the fleet. A new mission was invented to justify Gitmo. It was said the base helped watch for enemy fleets heading towards the Panama Canal. This was before aircraft and satellites, and when the United States controlled the canal. In 1959, the new communist government of Cuba declared the lease void and the U.S. military presence illegal, but the United States refused to leave, even though Gitmo serves no military purpose. In 2003, Gitmo was selected as the site for a military prison for suspected terrorists captured in Afghanistan. This gave the base a purpose, as 780 prisoners were sent to Gitmo, but most were found to have no intelligence value and sent home. Only 35 remain, with 20 cleared for release, and the remainder should be transferred out soon. Gitmo does have an airfield where no aircraft are based, yet the United States has 4 military air bases in the region, 2 in southern Florida, 1 in Honduras, and 1 in Puerto Rico to support any contingency, along with access to dozens of civilian airfields. These air bases are near logistics hubs to support operations, whereas Gitmo must import everything from the United States. Unfortunately, the U.S. military never closes a base voluntarily, even when they no longer serve a purpose. It's well past time to close Gitmo. A former head of the U.S. Atlantic Command, Marine Corps General John Sheehan, wanted it closed 2 decades ago. Polls show the vast majority of Americans support the closure of most U.S. military bases overseas. The American president can close any foreign base without congressional approval, and President Barack Obama once said he would close Gitmo.
As Americans, we have a profound commitment to justice. So it makes no sense to spend $3 million per prisoner to keep open a prison that the world condemns and terrorists use to recruit. Since I've been president, we've worked responsibly to cut the population of Gitmo in half. Now it is time to finish the job, and I will not relent in my determination to shut it down. It is not who we are. It's time to close Gitmo.
Gitmo was never closed, one of a dozen promises Obama never followed up on. The U.S. Navy fleet continues to shrink because massive Navy bureaucracies absorb a larger budget share each year. The lights could be shut off at expensive Guantanamo Bay naval base and everyone flown home tomorrow, and the U.S. Navy wouldn't notice, except that it would free manpower and resources for a dozen more warships. While Navy families enjoy the isolated Gitmo community, it is no fun for single sailors. For example, the commander of Gitmo, pictured, was caught having an affair with a married civilian on base, which led to a fistfight with her husband. Her husband was found dead the next day, causing the Navy much embarrassment with accusations that a murder was covered up.
Nearly 6 years after a deadly encounter at Naval Station Guantanamo Bay, the former commander of the base has learned his punishment. Behind me is John Nettleton, and he's been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, plus 1 year of supervised release, all related to his actions during the Navy's investigation of the death of 42-year-old Christopher Torr. News4JAX reporter Vic Micolucci has been on this case since Nettleton was indicted and was in court today for the sentencing and has reaction from Torr's loved ones.
No goodbyes, no I love you, no hugs, no kisses. That's what Christopher Torr's mother, Ann, told the judge about losing her son without notice. I remember running around the house in grief and shock, crying and screaming, soul-piercing grief. Torr's mother, sister, brothers, and loved ones came down from Pennsylvania for today's sentencing, telling the judge the base commander, John Nettleton, should be held accountable for his involvement in Torr's death. They said after the fight at Nettleton's home over an affair with Torr's wife, the captain only cared about protecting himself, lying to investigators to cover up the affair and the affray. They remarked that he would have thrown every resource available if it was his loved one missing. Nettleton had a lot of support. His father, ex-wife, and high-ranking military officials spoke about his character, a man who devoted 34 years to his country, a strong leader, and a good father. His attorneys pointed out this is not a murder case. An autopsy showed he drowned, but did not say why. Investigators had very little evidence about how he got into the water. Finally, for the first time since it all began 6 years ago, Nettleton spoke, saying, "I made mistakes, I failed, and I know that I'm accountable for my actions. I'd like to apologize to my Navy and Marine Corps friends, and I offer my sincere condolences to the Torr family."
Vic Micolucci, Channel 4, the local station.